So, hello, everybody. This is the Self-Worth Talks, and in this episode, we're going to be talking a lot about self-worth, of course, but especially related to women and their journey in terms of work and leadership. And that's why I have Karen Hinds on here today. Welcome, Karen. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I have been kind of reading about everything you do and what you stand for, and I think it's just amazing. So, you're really a role model for women. So, it's nice to have you here. And I'd like to talk about what you're doing and what you're seeing about in the here and now, in the future. But I also want to know, like, how did you get here? I read a little bit about it, but about your story, but maybe you could tell us, what your self-worth journey has been.
Sure. So I always like to start by saying, if you hear an accent, I'm from the beautiful island nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I'm an immigrant, and my parents came here when I was 15 years old. So my story and my sense of self-worth really is grounded in my upbringing as a woman who was nurtured, a young girl who was nurtured by a village of elders. So I start there, but when I came to the US and started school, and subsequently went on to college and then graduated, I recognized all along, I constantly had messages reinforced to me that I'm special, that I'm gifted, that I can do anything I set my mind to. And that was all throughout my life. That was not anything new for me. The one thing, where I am right now, I would say, I have had my company now for 25 years. I'm the author of 5 books. Number 6 is in the work. I've had the opportunity to travel around the world and work with lots of global leaders. But even in spite of all of that, when I think about self-worth, the journey to get here still had lots of bumps, because I think as the older I got and the more prominent rooms I was placed in, I found myself second guessing, my worth and who I was. So my journey in that regard is a lot like a lot of other women. And when I had some major personal life changes as well, so that contributed to how I felt about myself. And my spiritual journey played a part in it. So it's this pot of all the different pieces boiling up together, so to speak, that has brought me to a place where I know what it's like to have self-worth, what it's like not to have self-worth when you feel like the bottom has fallen out. And then you rebuild yourself again to a place where you know that you are worth everything that you have and you are, and you know you don't wait to be defined by anyone anymore. So that's where I am right now.
That's amazing. I see this with people all the time, and I know this for myself. It's the journey that, we just grow so much. We
Yes.
start out with a level of confidence and then things happen, right? These
Mm-hmm.
shifts that cause us to question, do I really know who I am?
Yeah.
And I think what's happening is we get to know who we are more and more by going through these different events that happen in our life. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I think those events are there to test our resolve and test what do you really believe. I remember something simple as when I just started my company, I was in my early 20s, and I was gung-ho. I was ready to take on the world and feel I can do anything. And I remember walking into a networking session, and for the level of power that it was in the room and who I was at the time, I was a fresh, my business wasn't even 6 months old, and I was in a room of some very powerful, power brokers. And I remember walking up to the only familiar face that I saw in the room. And he looked at me, and I was so excited to see him because I think, yes, at least I have a familiar face. I can talk to someone. And I remember he looked at me and he said, "How did you get in here?" And I just, I didn't know how to respond to that. My heart really sank because I was barely, and just coming out of my mid-20s, I think 26 or 27, and I was looking for validation from this person, and I didn't get that. And it knocked me off my feet for a little while. But then I had to really think, why was I looking to him for validation? Why did I need him? And why did I allow his comments to rattle me so much? And throughout my career, I've had other opportunities like that, unfortunately, where people begin to question your value. And unless you are sure of yourself, you begin to question your value. And I'm at a point in my life now where I no longer wait for anyone to validate me. I validate myself. But it's taken me a while to get here, because when I walk into a room now, I own the room. I don't care who's in the room. It's my room. And
Wow.
I'm waiting for anyone to tell me I belong. I know I belong once I walk into that room. I do what I need to do, and then I get out. I'm good.
Oh my God. Enough said. That's everything right there. That's amazing. What helped you, like whenever you have these moments of doubt about your value, what has helped you along the way to come to that place?
So I think initially, like everyone else, I did the take care of yourself, make sure you set boundaries. You do all the external things, you have a massage, go on long walks. Those are the external things you do. But really, when I became grounded internally in who I was and understanding my own value, and for me, it was a big part of my own spiritual work because of my faith. I do believe in God. Everybody believes in whatever they believe in, but for me, that's where I'm grounded. I begin to recognize that my value first comes from within. My value first comes from me understanding who I am, understanding the reason I'm here, understanding what is it I contribute, and understanding that my mere existence makes me valuable. And then I can do the external things like making sure I do a massage and setting boundaries and looking nice. Those are the external pieces. But once the internal piece, when I begin to connect to my own spirit, then you become unstoppable. That's where I am right now. But it's taken me a while to get here.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I hear you. It sounds like the best solution to figuring out your value is like to really go deep and go and turn it inside. Like, don't look outside for that validation.
Because the external changes, but who you are at your core, for the most part, stays the same. It's now for you to discover it and develop it and mold it so it can become you can become the best version of yourself. What I've found, and especially with women, and in the last couple of years, a lot of people are afraid to do that work because it means you have to let go of circumstances, people, habits, the things that you have surrounded yourself that comfort you and kind of keep you propped up, so to speak. You're going to have to let that go. And if you're not prepared, it can be a very devastating experience if you're not prepared. But I would say it's well worth it once you take that first step and begin to know that there's so much better on the other side.
Yeah. And I think that what happened with a lot of the clients that I've worked with and what I've witnessed is that when COVID happened, everybody's momentum stopped. So who you think you were, how you were showing up in the world, all of that was momentum, doing the thing you're supposed to do. And all of a sudden, people were kind of lost because they were looking outside all the time for validation and just rolling along. And then they were faced with who am I? Like all the internal stuff was coming up. And so people were very confused and unclear about what to do. Did you notice that with people that you were working with and women? And what did you?
It was men and women, because during COVID, our business, because we do a lot of work around leadership development and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we've been doing that now for over 25 years with companies globally. So when the pandemic hit and we had the country in an upheaval around the death of George Floyd, we were in a unique position to be extremely busy with our clients, working with leaders, not just in the Northeast, but throughout the United States. And what we found was leaders were grappling with what exactly is going on first. And number one, and number two, who are they now? Because they realized that who they were wasn't really a true depiction of who they wanted to be or aspired to be. Because again, they were propped up by doing things they should be doing, not the things that they really want to do. So you begin to see the stripping away of artificial boundaries, so to speak. People put all these walls, so artificial walls. They put artificial walls around themselves.
Yeah.
Recognizing that in order for them to get to the true essence of who they were, it meant changing work schedules. It meant saying that my family comes first. It meant saying, I may not have a family, but I don't want to work myself to death. And people leaving and going to different countries and going to do their dream job. And I saw a lot of clients just decide that they're going to change the way they operate in general. And I saw a lot of people going to a much more deeper spiritual place. That's what I saw. The other thing I saw was people are in need of a deeper sense of community. So we always talk about the value of networking and how critical it is to have communities. But what I'm finding, and even more so now, women and everybody, but women particularly, are looking for those authentic communities where they can be real and they can have the support that can push them to a new level. I'm a part of a couple of those communities where the women get together on a weekly basis. And it's not a mastermind group per se, but it's about how do we do life together? And that is personally and professionally, because we no longer want the separation of a personal lives from our professional lives.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's bringing people into so much confusion about how to be in the work world, like women and men, just integrating. Yeah.
Yeah, I think confusion for some and clarity for some, because,
Yeah.
because you begin to realize that in order for you to function at the level that you want to function, these are the things I want. And people are asking for them. They're asking for them. And yes, I know right now, a lot of companies are going through layoffs and people are losing their work, the work that they've known for quite a number of years. And there's another shift again happening, but it's still causing a lot of individuals to reevaluate what is it they want from life, how do they show up for life, and what's really important for them from a personal perspective, but also from a professional. I think we're no longer seeing cultures, for the most part. I mean, there's still some in existence where companies expect an individual to check their personal lives at the door. That's an unrealistic piece right now, because what we saw in the last 2 years, the workplace was practically in people's bedrooms, because that's where they worked from. That was their workspace. So the expectation of having your employees check your personal issues at the door is no longer reality, because you're bringing the whole person, and people want to be recognized for all of what they are and all of who they're becoming at the same time.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's do you have recommendations for how people could navigate this in their everyday life and going to work, or what has been helpful for you, or people that you've seen?
I think the first, this is going to sound almost simplistic, but I think the first step is people need to set aside some thinking time. It sounds ridiculous, but I had a mentor who said, Karen, you need thinking time, because we need to get to the place where, number one, we take the time to be able to connect with ourselves first. We're constantly looking for connection externally. And while that is an important part of any equation for success and moving forward, that connection with yourself comes first. I think once you create that space, it's a connection to something bigger than yourself. I'm finding there's a hunger and a thirst for that across the board, for however people want to define something bigger than themselves. For different people, it means different things, but people are looking for something more meaningful. And what they're recognizing is they're no longer willing to pretend they don't need it, because we're living in workspaces that says you can't mix those two worlds. But people need a space where they can have that grounding they need. That grounding that is so critical for their well-being. And then begin to look for those support systems that align with who you are and where you're going, because you can't do this journey alone. So who are the support systems? One or two people who are going to walk with you, because they're going to be there for you personally and professionally. And some you might find just personally, and some you might find professionally. But begin to redefine your sense of community so they're in alignment with where you want to go. Those are the few things I would say used to start with. Begin with yourself, get grounded, and begin to build those communities you need, because you're going to find that in doing so, you'll be able to address the things that often confuse us and frustrate us. Exhaustion, feeling like we're not very valuable, feeling we're invisible almost, and we don't know how to express our value. We don't take care of ourselves. So you can't operate like that in a vacuum. So having that community and finding yourself is going to be critical.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that companies are starting to create infrastructure for this? And
yes, I have a couple of clients who are, and some clients, although they may not be creating it as a broad brush approach, they're understanding that employees are approaching work differently. So I have clients who are carving out meditation time for their employees. I have clients who are, they're bringing in spiritual leaders to their companies. I've seen a couple of that as well. And I also I've seen where clients are giving people the time off when they're no longer, pushing them like they were used to, saying, you know what, I understand you might need a mental health day, recognizing that this is definitely connected to the mental health and well-being of their employees. So I am seeing a change. Does it mean their companies were still doing business as usual? Of course. I mean, that's just a given, but I am seeing a shift. But more so, I'm seeing a shift where individuals are taking the initiative to say, this is important to me, so I'm not waiting for the company to institute something. So let me carve out whatever approach I need for myself within the confines of what my company can do. And if the company is not willing to do that, there's some employees are saying, thank you, but goodbye. Yeah.
Yeah. I find that the young people, I have 20-something-year-old kids, right? Okay. So I hear their stories about work. Well, one of them is self-employed, but the other works somewhere, and they don't know how to, like, they don't know that understand that it's okay to try to reach out and make these connections. And, I think that they just kind of have suffered a lot because of the COVID, period, and everything's hybrid, a lot of hybrid now. So I think for them, it's hard. They need mentors, I think.
Yeah, they need mentors and they need advocates. So they need people who are not only going to hold their hand, but people who are going to speak for them in rooms where they do not have a voice.
Yeah.
And I think for this generation, especially those who've come out of college in the last 2 or 3 years, I mean, I have a 23, almost 24-year-old son as well, who graduated when, in the middle of the pandemic, and really hasn't had that typical work experience like many of us did when we came out, because it's been hybrid, it's been completely remote. And I think for companies who are bringing in, cohorts of these employees, is to really create those opportunities for them to network, to build relationships, to really reach across and say, let us help you with this, because they didn't have a chance to do it while they were in career services in college, like some of them may have had,
right?
That have had the opportunity. So now is the time. And of course, the onus is on that young employee as well, for them to really begin to take ownership of their career and figure out what are the gaps and how can I do that. So
yeah, that's great advice. So bringing your whole self and really being in touch with who you are now, how have you shown up differently? What's different about you now in terms of how you show up with your clients and what you want,
Yeah, so I often say I'm living my dream life now. I'm not waiting till I'm retired. So one of the things I did a couple of years, actually when the pandemic started, was I moved from Connecticut to West Palm Beach. And that was on purpose. For me, as I looked at my life, I was coming to a place where I realized, you know what? I keep saying I want to do all these things as I get older. Well, this is it. And if we're going to die in the pandemic, I was going to die in the sunshine. At least that's what I told myself. So I made a decision to move to a more tropical climate because, as I mentioned, I'm a Caribbean girl. I live in, I love gardening. So for me, I took care of the personal side that made my heart sing, that brought me joy. That was living a more organic, eating more organically, taking better care of myself, and living next to the ocean. So for me, doing that then gave me the opportunity to then define what do I shop with my clients. So I'm more selective about my clientele. I know that This time it's a different, it's not working for the sake of working. It's recognizing that with each project that we have an opportunity to create impact. And we've always been very straightforward with our clients, and that really hasn't changed. But I think for me, it's now coming to work with an even deeper sense of joy and purpose than I had before. And I was always happy and love what I did, but now it's at a much different level. And that permeates through everything that I do.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's beautiful. That's amazing. And I would imagine that's what you would recommend for people, but any last words recommending for, women or people working in the world today or living in the world?
Well, someone said, well, Karen, what happens if I can't pick up and move to a tropical climate? I think at this point for everyone is to figure out what is it that brings you joy. And, what is it going to take? What steps do you need to take right now to make that connection with who you are? Begin to give yourself the validation and belief in yourself that you can do this. But most of all, getting connected to your spirit, because we often say, I need a strategic plan. I need to do all this other stuff to figure out my next step. The answers are right in here. The answers are right here, and we keep going outside. So I would say parting words is to take the time to know that the blueprint for your life, the path you should take, the destiny you should embark on is right here. And it's accessible when you take the time to be quiet and then connect and then move forward. And that's if you're going to be CEO or you're going to be the person who is the gatekeeper for the CEO. It doesn't matter. It's still right here. And that's kind of, for some people, that's going to, ooh, that doesn't sound very strategic. But if you look at the people who are extremely successful, you will often find that they're leading from here. That they're leading with a greater sense of purpose, and there's a determination that you cannot get in their way because they're not leading from the head, they're leading from the heart as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for being here today. This was a really wonderful conversation.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Take care.